Imagine waking up every day with the feeling that something is about to go wrong, even when everything seems fine. Your heart races for no reason, your thoughts run wild without breaks, and your body, though exhausted, can't relax. It's as if the mind is always one step ahead, trying to guess the next problem, the next danger, the next loss. And the strangest part, most people don't even realize that this constant state of vigilance isn't normal. It's an invisible addiction, an addiction called control. It's shocking to realize that 90% of people today suffer from anxiety, not because of what happens out there, but because they desperately try to control what can't be controlled. It's the illusion of safety in a universe that is, by its very nature, uncertain, fluid, and mysterious. The human mind has become a machine for predicting futures, a simulator of catastrophes, an oracle disguised as logic. And the irony is that the more we try to predict the unpredictable, the further we move away from inner peace, harmony, and balance, the very things we long for. Some call it modern anxiety, but the real name is spiritual disconnection, that subtle split between the being and the natural flow of life. When spiritual life is forgotten, the mind takes the throne and becomes a tyrant. It believes it can control everything: time, destiny, people, love, the future. And in this desperate attempt to hold the wind still, it exhausts itself, tightens up, and creates the very chaos it fears most. The anxious brain, surprisingly, isn't the villain. It's a loyal servant trying to protect its owner from imaginary threats. The prefrontal cortex, that noble part of the human mind, was designed to anticipate, plan, and solve. But when fear takes the wheel, this gift becomes a golden cage. The person lives inside an endless loop of what-ifs, creating a labyrinth of futures that will never exist. What if I lose my job? What if they leave me? What if something bad happens to me? The anxious brain doesn't want to hurt, it wants control, because it believes that's the only path to safety, prosperity, and a bit of inner peace. But here lies the cruel paradox. The more we try to control, the more control we lose. The more we try to predict, the more disconnected we become from the present, the only place where spiritual energy truly flows. The nervous system collapses, the chakras misalign, the breath shortens, and the soul begins to scream in silence. It's as if the body were a sacred temple where the alarm never stops ringing. The mind tries to fix it, but the problem lives on another level. It's spiritual. Have you ever noticed how anxiety is, in truth, a sophisticated form of fear? A fear well-dressed, armed with spreadsheets, schedules, and contingency plans. People confuse control with safety, but they are opposites. Control is an attempt to dominate life. Safety is the natural state of one who trusts in the flow of the universe. And that's where true spiritual awakening begins. In the moment, a person realizes that control doesn't bring freedom. It brings imprisonment. The anxious mind is like a sailor trying to predict every wave, when the real secret is learning to surf. The true transformation begins when we stop resisting the tide and start flowing with it. When one understands that it's not them who control life, it's life that guides them. This isn't resignation, it's wisdom. The law of attraction teaches that we vibrate what we feel. Therefore, if we vibrate fear, we attract situations that confirm that fear. If we vibrate gratitude, faith, and abundance, the universe responds in kind. At that moment, the soul begins to remember its power. Control loses its grip. The breath becomes an anchor. With each deep inhale, you reconnect with the spiritual energy that created you. It's as if every cell in your body remembers it's already safe, here and now. There's no future to control, only a present to feel. A simple but powerful practice can start this process. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and inhale to the count of 4. Hold your breath for 2 seconds and exhale to the count of 6. Just observe. Notice the mind's impulse to think, to predict, to solve. Don't fight it. See it as a cloud passing through the sky. This is the spiritual release exercise for control. The breath becomes the invisible thread pulling you back to your center. When you practice this every day, something extraordinary begins to happen. Anxiety starts to lose its flavor. The body learns to trust. The soul expands, and that deep fear that tomorrow might collapse begins to dissolve. Because true control isn't about predicting the future. It's about choosing the vibration with which you attract it. That's how a success mindset, inner wealth, and energetic balance are born, the foundation of a prosperous spiritual life. But there's a curious story that perfectly illustrates this. A scientist known worldwide for his research on the brain and human behavior spent years trying to understand his own anxiety. He believed that planning was the key to success, that anticipating every risk was the way to guarantee the future. But as he grew older, he noticed something devastating. His mind was always on high alert, even when no danger was present. Then he had a profound realization. His anxiety was actually fear disguised as planning. This man began to meditate and study the spiritual laws of the mind. He discovered that true power wasn't in predicting, but in allowing. He noticed that every time he let go of control, something magical happened. Things worked themselves out. Projects flowed, the right people appeared, synchronicities unfolded. He called it the invisible algorithm of the universe, that mysterious mechanism that only functions when humans stop interfering with their own anxiety. And maybe this is the lesson many still resist learning. Anxiety is the price we pay for trying to be God, when all the universe ever asked for was trust. Inner peace doesn't come from certainty about tomorrow. It comes from total surrender to the now. And it's precisely in that moment that true spiritual awakening begins to bloom. When the scientist realized that his anxiety was fear dressed up as planning, something inside him shattered. But it was a sacred breaking. From that moment on, he understood that his entire life had been a dance between control and surrender. He saw with clarity that control had never brought him safety. It had only brought exhaustion. And it was in that instant of lucidity that he began to experience something he had never felt before: true inner peace. He described that sensation as a living silence. It wasn't the absence of thought, but the presence of spirit. An inner space where spiritual energy flowed freely, like a river that had stopped fighting the rocks. He realized that by letting go of control, he wasn't losing power. He was gaining the conscious power of the mind, the kind that co-creates reality in harmony with the universe. This is the part most people don't yet understand. Control is a mental trap built by an ego terrified of disappearing. The ego is like a frightened child who believes that if it doesn't supervise everything, something terrible will happen. But the paradox is that this constant effort to control is what actually creates chaos. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. And this is exactly where the nervous system starts to deregulate. The body lives in a permanent state of alert. The adrenal glands release cortisol, breathing becomes shallow, and the heart beats as if danger were real. But it's not. The danger lives in the mind, not in the world. The body reacts to thoughts, not facts. That's why the real antidote to anxiety isn't changing your environment. It's changing your inner vibration. When human beings truly grasp this, a process of deep spiritual healing begins. It's as if the body and soul enter back into agreement. The person stops being a victim of circumstances and becomes a conscious co-creator of their reality. Control dissolves and gives way to trust, and trust is faith in motion. But of course, letting go of control doesn't mean abandoning responsibility. It means recognizing that there is a sacred line between what you can act on and what you must trust. That line is the portal of balance. You act with intention, but surrender the outcome with gratitude. It's like planting a seed. You water it, nurture it, care for it, but you can't force it to bloom before its time. The universe has its own clock, and trying to rush it is the same as sabotaging the miracle. This is where the exercise of deprogramming control comes in. It's not just a breathing technique, it's a spiritual practice of deep self-awareness. Here's how it works. Close your eyes and imagine yourself standing in the center of a large golden spiral. As you inhale, visualize that energy rising from the earth and flowing through your chakras all the way to the top of your head. As you exhale, imagine every need for control dissolving into that light. Do this for 7 minutes. During that time, simply watch the impulse of your mind wanting to go back to thinking. This is the hardest part, to remain observing without engaging. When practiced daily, something beautiful happens. You begin to notice that there's a part of you that observes everything yet isn't shaken by anything. That part is pure consciousness, your spiritual essence. It exists beyond fear, beyond time, beyond control. When that presence grows stronger, the brain literally starts to reorganize itself. Neuroscience calls this conscious neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself through focus and energy. In other words, every time you let go of control, your brain learns that it no longer needs to live on alert. It learns to trust. The neurotransmitters of calm and joy, like serotonin and dopamine, begin to flow naturally. In this state, abundance, prosperity, and conscious manifestation become possible. Because the being no longer vibrates in fear, but in gratitude, anxiety is like smoke that fades when the light of awareness is turned on. But until that awakening happens, people believe that control equals safety. And that's why so many still live imprisoned, not in iron cells, but in mental ones. They pray for prosperity, but doubt that the universe will provide. They meditate for peace, but refuse to release the fear of the unknown. They crave freedom, yet won't let go of the wheel of their own lives. The irony is that when they finally do, they realize they never needed to control anything. The universe always knew the way. The law of attraction works not through effort, but through vibrational alignment. The human mind thinks it creates with thoughts, but it's feelings that shape reality. And feelings are vibration. They are energy. When the heart aligns with trust, everything naturally reorganizes. Opportunities appear, money flows, relationships harmonize. Remember that scientist? He began teaching his discoveries in lectures, often repeating the phrase that became his trademark. Control is the fear of trusting. And that sentence echoes like a mantra of liberation. Because deep down, that's it. Anxiety is the mind trying to protect itself from a universe it hasn't yet learned to love. Love is the antidote to control. To love the mystery, to love the unpredictable, to love even the silence of not knowing. That is the gateway to spiritual awakening. When love enters, fear dissolves. When fear dissolves, the energy of co-creation begins to flow with power. It's as if the universe whispers, "Finally, you're letting me guide you." But something even deeper happens. When one abandons control, they discover that everything they were searching for outside was already within. Inner wealth, spiritual peace, harmony. None of it comes from the external world. Control is an attempt to fill the void that only spiritual self-knowledge can touch. And when that touch happens, it feels like a gentle awakening, a silent rebirth. And it's precisely at this point, when a person learns to trust the invisible, that they discover the most powerful force in the universe, unshakable faith. Faith isn't blind belief, it's a vibration of certainty in the middle of uncertainty. It's the heart saying, "I don't know what's coming, but I know it will be good." And maybe this is where the real journey begins, when the human being understands that control is the mind's prison, and surrender is the soul's freedom. Life doesn't need to be predicted, it needs to be felt. But there's an even deeper secret, one that few have the courage to face. Anxiety is only the symptom. The true cause lies in an even more hidden layer of consciousness. The hidden cause of anxiety does not live only in the mind. It resides deep within the soul, where ancient memories and energetic patterns take root like echoes from the past. It's the silent accumulation of everything the being tried to control and never could. Every frustration, every unmet expectation, every unspoken fear settles into the subtle layers of the body like small cracks of energy. Over time, those cracks turn into blockages, and those blockages become symptoms. What we call anxiety is in truth the soul's cry for liberation, but the ego, proud in its logic, tries to silence that cry with even more control. It says, if I plan better, if I work harder, if I'm always prepared, nothing can hurt me. Yet, what it doesn't realize is that life cannot be controlled. It can only be lived. And while the ego struggles, the spirit waits patiently for the moment of spiritual awakening. And here comes the question: how do we free ourselves from something so deeply rooted? The answer is both simpler and more challenging than it seems. To free yourself from anxiety is to learn to trust again. Not a naive trust, but a wise one, grounded in connection with the universe. You see, the anxious mind believes that everything depends on it. It sees itself as the sole force capable of keeping the world in balance. But the universe is an intelligent field of energy, a living organism that responds to the vibration of every thought and emotion. When a person relaxes control, they tune into this field and begin to manifest what they truly desire. The law of attraction isn't an esoteric theory. It's a spiritual law that governs all forms of creation, and creation begins within. The outer world is merely a reflection of the inner state. When there is fear, the universe mirrors fearful situations. When there is gratitude, the universe returns blessings. When there is inner peace, the doors of abundance open effortlessly. Anxiety blocks that flow because it traps energy in the future. Faith, on the other hand, brings energy back to the now. And the now is the only true point of power. There's a metaphor I love. Imagine the mind as an antenna. When it vibrates in fear, it tunes into frequencies of chaos. When it vibrates in love, it connects with frequencies of harmony. Spiritual practice, then, is the daily tuning of that antenna until alignment with the divine becomes second nature. One of the most powerful practices for this is guided meditation for releasing control. In it, the practitioner is guided to observe thoughts without identifying with them. Each time the mind tries to control, they simply notice, there's control trying to save me again. This simple act of noticing is the first step toward expanding consciousness. Because what is observed no longer dominates. What is observed dissolves in the light of awareness. Gradually, one begins to see that control was only a mask. Behind it, there has always been fear, fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of not being enough, and deeper still, the fear of not existing at all. That's why control is so addictive. It gives the illusion that if I control, I exist. But the spiritual self doesn't need that validation. It already is. This realization changes everything. When the being awakens to that truth, the body relaxes, the mind slows down, the heart expands. Spiritual energy begins to flow again through the centers of power, the chakras realign, and a wave of balance and harmony fills the being. It's as if the body finally exhales after years of invisible suffocation. And something curious happens in this process. Life begins to conspire in your favor. Synchronicities appear, doors open. The right people show up at the right time. This isn't magic. It's spiritual quantum physics. It's conscious co-creation in motion. The universe always responds to the purest vibration of the heart. Here lies a revelation that few have the courage to accept. Anxiety isn't the enemy, it's the messenger. It appears to show where the being is disconnected from its own essence. It's the reminder that the mind has taken the throne that once belonged to the soul. When anxiety is met with love instead of rejection, it transforms into a portal of spiritual self-knowledge. Control is like a wall the ego built to protect itself from the unknown. But the unknown is precisely where the divine resides. Whoever runs from the unknown runs from enlightenment itself. That's why the path of healing requires the courage to feel what we've always avoided. When one allows themselves to feel fear without trying to control it, fear transforms into light. That is spiritual alchemy, the transformation of shadow into wisdom. As the mind surrenders, it discovers that real power doesn't lie in predicting tomorrow, but in being present enough to co-create the now. And when the now is lived with gratitude, the future takes shape in tones of prosperity. Some people, upon hearing this, say, "But it's hard to trust," and it is. Trust is a revolutionary act in a world programmed for fear. That's why trust must be trained. It begins in small moments, taking a deep breath in the face of the unexpected, giving thanks in the midst of chaos, accepting what cannot be changed. Over time, that practice reprograms the mind. The impulse to control weakens, and the impulse to flow strengthens. That's the secret of spiritual masters. They don't live without challenges, they live in peace despite them. Because they've understood that the universe never makes mistakes. Everything that happens for the awakening of consciousness. Even anxiety is a disguised blessing, a call to return to your own center. And as this understanding deepens, something profound is ignited within. A call to go beyond mental healing and dive into energetic and spiritual healing, because all anxiety, in its deepest essence, is a disconnection from the divine source. And reconnection is the true path to inner illumination. But there is still a subtler layer, one that most people avoid confronting. Control isn't just a mental habit, it's an inherited pattern, an ancestral programming. Control, that impulse that feels so personal, is actually a collective echo. It's an ancestral inheritance that has crossed generations and quietly seeped into human consciousness. Since ancient times, humankind has feared the unknown, storms, illness, loss, time itself. That fear accumulated in the collective unconscious, shaping behaviors, religions, economies, and even science. The modern mind is nothing but the continuation of that ancient fear, disguised as logic. And that's why anxiety is so universal. It is humanity's cry to predict the unpredictable. Every person carries within them the emotional DNA of those who came before. The traumas of ancestors, the unexpressed pains, the silent survival pacts, all of these vibrate in the energetic field. When someone tries too hard to control, they're often trying to compensate for a pain that isn't even theirs. Maybe a grandfather lost everything, and the mind inherited the fear of scarcity. Maybe a mother suffered for love, and the daughter learned that love means constant vigilance. And so the soul keeps replaying these patterns of fear, believing it's protecting itself, when in truth, it's just perpetuating the block. But awakening begins when the being recognizes that they don't need to carry what isn't theirs. Liberation begins the moment they take a deep breath and say inwardly, "I return to the universe all that doesn't belong to me." That simple intention has power, because spiritual energy responds to consciousness. Wherever there is light of awareness, ancient shadows dissolve. At this point, energetic healing becomes inevitable. The body, once contracted by fear, begins to open like a flower. Energy flows freely through the chakras again, and the soul feels at home. The heart becomes the new command center. And the heart doesn't control, it trusts. It understands that true power doesn't lie in predicting, but in allowing. It lives in a state of vibrational faith, a silent kind of certainty that doesn't depend on evidence. This is the essence of practical spirituality, bringing the divine into daily life. When a person begins to act from this state, everything changes. Decisions become lighter, relationships more genuine, work more creative. Because they no longer act from lack, but from wholeness. Fear gives way to gratitude, and gratitude opens the gates to prosperity and abundance. And something almost magical happens when control dissolves. The mind discovers the joy of surrender. Surrender isn't giving up. It's cooperating with the universe. It's the moment when the human being and the divine force stop being two and become one single flow. In that state, conscious manifestation happens effortlessly. What once seemed out of reach now unfolds through natural synchronicity. The law of attraction stops being a theory and becomes a living experience. But to reach that point, courage is required. The courage to feel without needing to understand, the courage to release certainty and dive into mystery. It's in that surrender that true illumination is born, not a distant light at the top of a mountain, but a quiet flame burning within the chest. The awakened being understands that everything they try to control, they imprison, but everything they release with love flourishes, and so they become the gardener of their own destiny. They plant with intention, water with faith, and trust in the divine harvest. They no longer fear time, because they know that time is simply how the universe organizes miracles. This awareness even changes the brain's physical structure. Science now confirms what the spiritual masters have always known: regular practice of guided meditation, conscious breathing, and daily gratitude strengthens the nervous system and creates new neural pathways of calm and presence. Body and spirit align, and the human begins to live from the inside out, guided not by fear, but by wisdom. And it's fascinating to realize how, in this new state, even the concept of problem transforms. What once seemed like a threat now feels like an invitation. What once caused panic now awakens curiosity. What once looked like chaos now reveals an expansion of consciousness. Life ceases to be a series of unpredictable events and becomes a dance of synchronicities. There's a symbolic passage, almost poetic, that many masters describe: the moment when a being realizes that control was never theirs, and that this is a blessing. Because if it were, life would be far too small, limited by the narrow vision of the mind. When we release control, we give the universe permission to surprise us with something infinitely greater. And in that moment, we finally understand the true meaning of inner wealth. Not possession, but trust. Not accumulation, but flow. Control is the attempt to hold life still. Faith is the act of opening your hands. And when your hands open, the universe fills them. The success mindset is born from that. Not from effort, but from surrender. Not from rigidity, but from flow. Spiritual success is not conquering the world, it's being at peace within it. And then, in silence, the being looks back and realizes all the anxiety, all the fear, all the resistance were merely steps that led them here. The suffering was not punishment, it was the push needed for awakening. Control, ironically, led them to surrender, and surrender returned them to life. In that instant, they understand the secret humanity has spent centuries trying to uncover. Peace doesn't come when everything is under control. It arrives when nothing needs to be. And right there, in that emptiness full of presence, the true miracle begins. The rebirth of the being. They no longer seek balance because they are balance. They no longer chase light because they are light. They no longer try to control life because they finally understand that life has always been guiding them. And in that new state, they smile. Not because they know what will happen tomorrow, but because they've finally discovered what it means to be alive and free. So, after all this, take a deep breath. Feel that calm beginning to rise inside you, not because the world has changed, but because you have. The anxiety that once screamed now only whispers. It hasn't disappeared. It has simply become your teacher. And maybe that's the great revelation no one ever told you. You never needed to control life to be at peace. You only needed to trust it. Look around you. How many things have worked out without you planning them? How many times has the universe placed you exactly where you needed to be, even when it didn't make sense at the time? How many blessings have you almost missed because you were too busy trying to predict the future? Maybe your true power doesn't lie in knowing what will happen, but in knowing who you are while everything happens. And when you remember that, fear loses its grip. The mind quiets. The heart takes the lead. And the entire universe begins to move in the direction of your vibration. So tell me, how long will you keep trying to control what was made to flow? How long will you keep denying the abundance that awaits you once you release fear? Isn't it time to let the universe surprise you? Because it's when you surrender with love that life starts to conspire with power. It's when you let go of control that spiritual awakening truly happens. And it's in that very moment of surrender that manifestation, prosperity, and inner peace naturally begin to find you. But of course, awakening doesn't happen by listening once. It begins when you decide to apply what you've learned. So, try this today. Close your eyes for a few minutes, take a deep breath, and whisper to yourself, "I trust." Repeat it as many times as you need, and watch how the world around you starts to rearrange itself in the most magical ways. If this message touched your heart, it means your spiritual awakening has already begun. So take this moment. Leave a comment below telling me what you felt, what resonated most deeply with you. I want to read your story. I want to walk with you on this journey of expanding consciousness. And if you want to keep learning how to free yourself from fear, how to turn the energy of anxiety into peace, prosperity, and spiritual power, make sure to subscribe to the channel right now and turn on notifications. Because what's coming next will show you that living in harmony with the universe is the true secret to freedom.